Hi everyone, I'm Daniel, and I'm a little bit of a rules nerd for Arkham Horror the card game. I know the rules reference and FAQ backwards and forwards, I'm pretty attentive to the rules templating in this game, and some of the videos I'm most proud of on my channel talk about the rules nuances you might not be familiar with. Speaking of, if you like learning about the rules and want to hear more about this sort of thing, liking, commenting, subscribing is always welcome. Anyways, while thinking about the rules always makes my game design gears start moving, I also know that the rules are not always the most intuitive, to put it mildly. And to be honest, my interest in the rules is less about being a stickler and more about wondering how the developers could make them better. So today, together let's look through a tough question that tends to come up every now and then. What is the interaction between allies like Beat Cop and Pit Viper, a memorable enemy from the Forgotten Age? Let's read through the card text of Pit Viper first. Forced. After Pit Viper deals you damage from its attack, if you are not poisoned, put a set-aside poison weakness into play in your threat area. Never mind what the poison weakness is, it doesn't matter. The question is, what can cause you to get this weakness? If you get attacked and put the damage on your investigator card, you certainly get poisoned. And it's also pretty clear that if you cancel the attack, like with dodge or the damage with flesh ward, you don't get poisoned. But let's say you happen to get attacked by the Pit Viper and you place the damage on an ally like Beat Cop. What happens then? In other words, who got dealt damage, you or the Beat Cop? It turns out that that question already contains a little bit of a misunderstanding. Your assets don't actually take damage or horror apart from you as a player, even if it is direct damage or horror onto the asset. The rules use the word you to mean quite a few things, but in this case, they don't mean your investigator card, they mean you as a player. This is much clearer when we break down what happens when you take or are dealt damage or horror. First, you determine the amount of damage and or horror to be taken. Then, you get to assign said damage and or horror onto eligible cards you control. That can be your investigator card or any assets as long as it isn't direct. These two steps are crucial. Assignment of the tokens themselves is separate from being dealt damage in the first place. So, it doesn't matter where you assign the damage from Pit Viper's attack, you are still being dealt the damage and you will be poisoned. To be crystal clear, the FAQ spells it out directly. When an ability refers to you in response to taking damage or being dealt damage, it also includes any assets you control. In other words, assets you control taking damage is kind of a subset of you taking damage. Okay, case closed. Well, it turns out that some people hate this ruling. Here's a venerable internet commenter voicing their opinion about the idea that you still get poisoned if the Beat Cop gets the damage. For those of you annoyed at this kind of question and rather just do things thematically, I kind of get you, but Arkham Horror has always been a card game that has to prioritize mechanics and rules over the flavor, and this has been the case from the very beginning. It's why we get some weird things like lockpicks that can't circumvent a locked door. If you can't investigate a location, you can't investigate the location. I don't care what the names of the cards are. Heck, you can even breach the door on that location, and that still won't help you with the investigation because the door is still locked. Here's another one. Using Duke the dog for investigate action isn't actually the dog investigating. You are still investigating. It says so right on the card. And yeah, that means you get the bonus from a magnifying glass, even if that doesn't make a lot of sense. You know what else doesn't make any sense? Using track shoes through underwater locations in Innsmouth. Or using marksmanship to fire a weapon all the way from Arkham, Massachusetts to Montreal, Canada, just as easily as you can from a hallway to the attic. I could go on and on. It's your game, and you can play however you want and house rule any of these interactions, but I'm here to talk about the rules, and the rules kind of have to be this way so that they don't limit the story possibilities. We don't want all connecting locations to share some physical distance between each other just because we want marksmanship to make sense. Maybe Duke really has a magnifying glass taped up to his eye, or Ashcan Pete is holding it in front of the good dog. It doesn't really matter. Have fun and let your mind be creative to make it make sense to your group, but hand-waving away the rules instead causes more problems and can break other interactions. Well, I'll come back to this discussion later, but we're actually not done with our old friend the Pit Viper. Okay, your Beat Cop that got damage assigned to it is a real basic case. Let's now consider a different situation where you don't even assign Pit Viper's attack damage to one of your assets, but rather to someone else's cards, such as Tetsuo Mori, who can be assigned damage and/or horror dealt to other investigators at his location, or to Hank Sampson's investigator card, which has much the same text. So, who gets poisoned? From what I said before, you're still taking the damage, you're just assigning it elsewhere, just like with the beat cop from before, so you should still get the poison weakness, right? I actually don't know. Here's more from that FAQ entry from before, talking about Survival Knife, which seems to indicate that, quote, if all the damage from that attack is assigned to another investigator or their assets, then no damage has been dealt to you. What? Who is dealt damage then? Does the player with Tetsuo get poisoned instead? Does no one get poisoned? Maybe this is a red herring, and the survival knife ruling here is talking about how the survival knife is asking for something entirely different, or maybe this FAQ entry is extremely poorly worded. Well, let me know what you think in the comments, because I think this is about as clear as mud. Alright, let's move on to the main event for this video, which is to go back to one of your own allies, but this time it is a guard dog from the core set. Same deal as before. You get attacked by the Pit Viper, and you assign the damage to the guard dog. You get poisoned, right? But this time, the guard dog's text is important. As a reaction, when an enemy attack deals damage to guard dog, deal 1 damage to the attacking enemy. Well, let's ignore the early Arkham templating error here. Enemy attacks generally don't deal damage directly to guard dog, and assume that this wording is shorthand for when damage from an enemy attack is assigned to guard dog for it to function at all. Okay, so you assign the damage to guard dog, you deal 1 damage to the Pit Viper, killing it. Now what? Do you get poisoned? Is the Pit Viper gone before that could happen? This is a complicated enough question that causes lots of animosity when discussing it, so I thought I'd send this into the development team for an answer. I'll read out my question in its entirety. I'm writing to confirm my understanding of the interaction of Pit Viper and guard dog. If Pit Viper attacks me, and I assign the damage to guard dog, does the guard dog's ability, when an enemy attack deals damage, remove the Pit Viper from play before the Pit Viper's forced ability triggers, after Pit Viper deals you damage? My understanding is that this is the case, because of the when versus after timing, following the ruling on conglomeration of spheres and melee weapons. Is this understanding correct? That is, the guard dog's ability can defeat the Pit Viper before the forced ability would give me the poison weakness? Well, there's a lot in there, so let's get you up to speed on the conglomeration of spheres ruling first. This is an enemy in the Dunwich Legacy that has a particularly nasty effect for having so much health. Forced. After you perform an attack against the conglomeration of spheres using a melee card, discard that card. So, if you fight with a machete, you'll deal some damage, and then after the attack resolves, your weapon gets discarded. The theme, of course, is that your close combat weapon gets absorbed into the conglomeration. But what if the attack is lethal? This was already ruled upon some time ago. Quote, does the ability trigger if the conglomeration of spheres is defeated during the attack and is no longer in play by the time its triggering condition occurs? Answer, the after in spheres' ability would come into effect once the test is resolved and damage is dealt. Defeating the spheres with a melee card could not cause the ability to trigger. In other words, the spheres are removed from play before its forced ability can initiate. And of course, forced effects cannot trigger on cards that have already left play. If they did, man, why bother getting rid of hypochondria? There's a second wrinkle, and this one is probably the most unintuitive if you haven't read the rules reference carefully. While both Guard Dog and Pit Viper seem to have similar triggers, dealing damage, they actually do not share the timing. Guard Dog has when triggering, and Pit Viper has after triggering. Let's read through these rules entries together. When. The word when refers to the moment immediately after the specified timing point or triggering condition initiates, but before its impact upon the game state resolves. The resolution of a when ability interrupts the resolution of its timing point or triggering condition. Okay, so when happens early. This is necessary for Guard Dog. you may have read before that you deal damage using Guard Dog even if the enemy attack damage is lethal to Guard Dog. The when timing is why. You actually get to resolve its ability before Guard Dog gets defeated. Now, let's look at after. The word after refers to the moment immediately after the specified timing point or triggering condition has fully resolved. So, this happens late. In other words, do everything relating to the triggering condition first, and then come back and trigger this ability. The question here boils down to, is the timing on the Pit Viper too late? Is the Pit Viper removed from play via Guard Dog's reaction before Pit Viper's force ability can initiate? The answer is yes. Correct. Assigning the damage from Pit Viper to Guard Dog and triggering Guard Dog's ability makes it so that the Pit Viper is out of play when its force ability would trigger, and as a result, you would not give yourself a poison weakness. So, there is definitely a way to avoid one of the nastier effects of the Forgotten Age, and that's nice. But some people are still mad about this ruling. Here's what another esteemed internet commenter directed at me. Yeah, it is a little funny. You still end up with damage on the dog, but no poison from the supposedly venomous serpent. Remember that the mechanics of this game come first, and there's really no way to tie the damage to the poison. These are simply two different effects. A fair question that I'd rather pose is whether or not the text on the cards matches the intuitive understanding of the rules. In other words, maybe the problem isn't the rules or the mechanics, but rather the problem lies in that choice of rules templating isn't right for this kind of card. The Pit Viper could have used the when timing as well, which, since it's a forced effect, would have given it priority over the Guard Dog, but the designers did not do that. Was that the intention of the designers, to allow this loophole, or was it an oversight? I don't know. But some fans hate it when the card doesn't do what it says on the card, or rather what they think the card says. Which is a bit funny, because some other fans of the game cherish exploiting clearly unintentional loopholes or gaps in the rules. But that's a conversation for another time. I do think that it's understandable to be frustrated when a game this complex plays a bit fast and loose with the card templating, and when the plain English reading of the cards brings you to a different conclusion than what something deep in the rules reference says. And I know that it's a cooperative game, so a lot of people do prefer to just play in a way that just feels right. But if you made it this far into the video, you're probably interested in internalizing some of these vagaries in the rules, so let's sum up by reviewing some of the confusion we cleared up today. First, we talked about how taking or being dealt damage is a separate step from when assignment of damage happens. Second, we showed that some forced effects might not trigger if the card they are printed on leaves play early. And lastly, we focused on the difference between the when versus after timing. And trust me, now that you've learned about when versus after, you're going to start to notice it on cards all over the place. But I get it. The whole Pit Viper poison interaction seems to go against the spirit of the card, which is to punish you for getting attacked. And some people certainly still don't care for the basic version discussed earlier, where assigning damage to most allies doesn't keep you from getting poisoned. But in a game with so many interactions, it is crucial to have a timing framework, even if it is complex. That's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and breaking down all the steps was helpful. Are there other aspects of the rules reference you'd like me to walk you through? Let me know down in the comments below, and I'd be happy to make a video about them.